Imagine this for decades. Africans traveling across their own continent have been stopped, delayed, and humiliated by endless visa lines, embassy appointments, and hundreds of dollars in fees just to visit a neighboring sister nation. That picture of barriers and walls has defined Africa's story of borders. But now, in a move that nobody saw coming, Burkina Faso has torn down that wall. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not just another policy change. This is history being written in front of our eyes. On Thursday, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, at only 36 years old, stood behind a decision that could change Africa's future forever. Burkina Faso has officially removed all visa fees for every African citizen. From now on, whether you are a farmer from Mali, a student from Ghana, or an artist from Nigeria, you can walk into Burkina Faso without paying a single cent for a visa. Only one simple online clearance, and you are welcome. Pause and think about that. In Europe, 27 nations move freely under Schengen. In North America, citizens cross borders between the US and Canada every day with little trouble. But in Africa, where nations share blood culture and history, nearly half of all travel still requires a visa. For too long, unity has been a song sung by politicians under the African Union flag, while ordinary people kept paying the price. But today, something has shifted. Ibrahim Traoré is not waiting for permission from Paris, Brussels, or Washington. He is acting, and he is daring the rest of Africa to act with him. So here is the question for you. Could this be the first step toward a borderless Africa, where Africans finally move as freely as Europeans do in Europe, and deeper still? Do you believe that this young soldier-turned-president has the power to make real the dream of Pan-African unity? Stay with us because this story is bigger than visas. It's about sovereignty, dignity, and the future of an entire continent. Please share if you feel that you are one of the first to know about and support President Ibrahim Traoré. And don't forget to subscribe if you believe that the truth is more important than the headlines. On Thursday morning, inside the modest but determined Cabinet Hall in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's government took a decision that rippled across the continent. The cabinet meeting was chaired by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, and when the session concluded, Security Minister Mohamed Sana stepped before the cameras. His announcement was direct, simple, and almost unbelievable. From this day forward, no African citizen will ever again pay visa fees to enter Burkina Faso. For many outside Africa, this might sound like a small bureaucratic shift. But for Africans, the implications are profound. Imagine being a teacher in Senegal who wants to attend a cultural festival in Burkina Faso. In the past, she would have been forced to pay the equivalent of a month's salary just for a visa. Or picture a young entrepreneur from Côte d'Ivoire hoping to attend a business conference in Ouagadougou, hundreds of dollars wasted on paperwork before even booking a bus ticket. That reality has now changed overnight. The government clarified the mechanics. Anyone holding an African passport will only need to fill out a simple online application for security clearance. No more trips to a French consulate, no more waiting weeks, no more bribes at border checkpoints. Once the clearance is granted, the traveler simply packs their bags and heads to Burkina Faso. What's even more striking is that this applies not just to countries aligned with Burkina Faso's new alliance, but even to citizens of ECOWAS nations. Remember, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger had recently withdrawn from ECOWAS after being slapped with punishing sanctions. Many expected closed borders and isolation. Instead, Traoré's government has thrown the doors wide open. Citizens from those very nations whose governments sanctioned Burkina Faso are now welcome visa-free. This is not just politics. This is a statement of maturity, reconciliation, and confidence. The symbolism goes even deeper when one considers the colonial past. For decades, France monopolized visa processing for her former colonies. Africans often had to travel to French embassies, pay French-controlled fees, and endure French oversight simply to visit their neighbors. This policy by Burkina Faso is a direct rejection of that colonial arrangement. It tells Paris and the world we are capable of managing our own borders, our own movement, our own people. The government also framed the decision as an economic opportunity. A spokesperson emphasized that welcoming Africans visa-free would boost tourism, showcase Burkina Faso's culture, and strengthen its visibility abroad. The logic is clear. When barriers are removed, people travel more. And when people travel, they spend, invest, and share culture. From musicians to traders, from students to pilgrims, new roads are opening. But beyond economics, there is a moral and emotional weight. In Africa, borders were drawn not by Africans, but by Europeans during the Berlin Conference of 1884-85. Those artificial lines divided families, tribes, and entire civilizations. Today in 2025, one African leader is taking the symbolic hammer to those colonial walls. Observers also note how this policy aligns with the ideals of pan-Africanism. It echoes the vision of leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, who dreamed of a continent where Africans could move freely, trade freely, and defend their sovereignty together. By eliminating visa fees, Burkina Faso is not just saving travelers money, it is breathing life into an idea that has sat idle for decades. Consider the timing. Traoré's Burkina Faso is under international pressure. Sanctions, security threats, and accusations swirl around the government. Yet instead of retreating inward, the leadership has expanded outward, embracing Africans as brothers and sisters. It is both a practical decision and a bold symbolic gesture. This is why many are calling it the most significant African policy announcement in decades. Not because visas themselves are the heart of Africa's struggle, but because they represent the daily chains of inconvenience, humiliation, and exploitation. Chains that Captain Ibrahim Traoré has just broken for over 1 billion people. The true drama of Burkina Faso's announcement lies not only in the policy itself, but in the timing and the defiance with which it was made. Just months ago, the Sahel alliance Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger shocked the continent by pulling out of ECOWAS, the long-standing West African bloc. The reason ECOWAS had imposed punishing sanctions on them after their military-led governments took power. Banking restrictions, trade barriers, closed borders, all designed to suffocate these nations into compliance. Many expected them to bend to crawl back under the weight of isolation. But instead of retreating, they advanced. And Thursday's visa announcement is the clearest sign yet that Ibrahim Traoré and his allies will not be bullied into submission. Imagine the scene: ECOWAS leaders sitting in plush conference halls condemning the Sahel states, while Traoré quietly prepares a policy that throws open his country's borders to the very people ECOWAS claimed to represent. It was a masterstroke. A reminder that legitimacy does not come from Western approval or regional clubs, but from the trust of ordinary Africans. This is where the emotional power of the announcement truly hits. For decades, the African Union and its member states have sung the hymn of unity. Summits, speeches, and slogans fill the air, but on the ground nothing changes. Borders remain shut. Travelers still line up for stamps and stickers, and all the while young Africans watch their future drained away in bureaucratic fees. Traoré's move cut through that noise like a blade. It wasn't a speech, it was an action. The contrast could not be starker. While AU elites debate protocol, Burkina Faso simply acted. While ECOWAS punished, Burkina Faso forgave. By extending visa-free entry even to citizens of ECOWAS states, Traoré demonstrated a level of emotional intelligence rarely seen in geopolitics. It was a gesture of reconciliation without submission, hospitality without weakness. And then came the reactions. Across African social media, waves of praise flooded in. Many young people compared the decision to Europe's Schengen Agreement, asking why Africans had to wait so long for something so obvious. Pan-African activists hailed the move as the dawn of a new era with Burkina Faso at its heart. Even in countries far from the Sahel, Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, the message resonated. If a small, landlocked, war-torn country can take bold steps for unity, what excuse do bigger powers have? Of course, not all responses were celebratory. Critics from within ECOWAS labeled the decision reckless, accusing Traoré of playing politics with national security. Some Western analysts warned of uncontrolled migration flows and regional instability. But these criticisms only highlighted the deeper issue. For too long, African movement has been controlled by fear of terrorism, fear of instability, fear of the unknown. Traoré's policy rejected that fear. There is also an undeniable symbolism here. Burkina Faso has been at the center of repeated coup violence and instability. Yet in this moment, it was the very country accused of chaos that offered clarity. By lifting visa fees, Burkina Faso told the continent, "We may be small, we may be embattled, but we will not be caged." This is the climax of the story, a nation once dismissed as dependent and unstable, now standing tall, rewriting the rules of engagement. Ibrahim Traoré, barely 36, placed himself not only in the footsteps of Thomas Sankara, but also on a collision course with the comfortable order of African politics. He made his nation's borders into a symbol of defiance and hope. For ordinary Africans, the significance cannot be overstated. It is one thing to hear a leader speak about dignity and sovereignty. It is another to feel it in your pocket when you no longer have to pay hundreds of dollars for permission to cross a line on a map. That is the emotional crescendo, the place where politics touches daily life. And it is here, in this intersection of symbolism and practicality, that Burkina Faso's announcement becomes unforgettable. The consequences of Burkina Faso's bold announcement are already echoing far beyond airport halls and border posts. For ordinary Africans, this is not abstract diplomacy, it is a tangible shift in their daily lives. Consider the civil impact first. Picture a young Ghanaian student who dreams of studying in Ouagadougou. Until now, the barrier of visa fees might have killed that dream before it began. Now the door stands open. Or think of a Senegalese trader who wants to sell fabrics at a market in Burkina Faso. What once cost him weeks of paperwork and hard-earned savings can now be accomplished with a few clicks online. For families divided across colonial borders, the news is even more profound. Visiting relatives no longer requires financial sacrifice. Weddings, funerals, and festivals, moments that define human connection, can once again be shared without bureaucratic obstacles. Tourism is another major sphere of impact. Burkina Faso, often overlooked in global travel guides, suddenly finds itself on the map for Africans seeking affordable travel. Cultural festivals, historic landmarks, and music scenes may now draw visitors from across the continent. The government was quick to underline this point. Visa-free access is not just about politics, it is about celebrating Burkinabe culture, welcoming brothers and sisters to experience its rhythms, cuisine, and traditions. Every busload of visitors brings not only laughter and songs, but also spending power that flows directly into local businesses. On the political front, the move strengthens the legitimacy of Ibrahim Traoré's transitional government. After two coups in 2022, critics inside and outside Burkina Faso painted him as just another military strongman. But policies like this chip away at that narrative. They show him as a leader with vision, willing to make sacrifices for unity and capable of delivering reforms that affect millions of lives. This is how a transitional soldier becomes a statesman, by making decisions that matter to the people. The ripple effect also extends to the idea of pan-African integration. By eliminating visa fees, Burkina Faso aligns itself with countries like Kenya, Rwanda, and Ghana, which have already eased travel restrictions for Africans. But Traoré went further, choosing not just partial openness, but total visa fee removal. This leap places Burkina Faso at the forefront of the movement, turning it into a laboratory for what true African free movement could look like. There is also a symbolic victory against neo-colonialism. For decades, visas between African nations were not just about security, they were about control. They reminded citizens that they could not move freely in their own homeland while Europeans crossed into Africa with relative ease. By tearing down this barrier, Burkina Faso delivered a psychological blow to that imbalance. It told Africans everywhere your dignity comes first. Yet the decision is not without risks. More open borders will require stronger security screening, efficient online systems, and diplomatic coordination. Critics warn of the potential for smuggling or extremist movement. But Traoré's government seems confident that with technology and community vigilance, these risks can be managed. And importantly, the benefits, greater trust, unity, and opportunity outweigh the fears. Civil society groups across Africa are already reacting. Pan-African youth movements have praised the policy, calling it proof that leaders can turn rhetoric into action. Religious leaders frame it as a moral act of brotherhood, while academics highlight its role in advancing regional integration, long stalled by bureaucracy. For Burkinabe citizens themselves, the pride is palpable. A country once seen as peripheral is suddenly leading the continent in a way that touches ordinary lives. Taxi drivers, market vendors, teachers, all can see the practical and symbolic value of being the nation that dared to open its doors. In short, the civil and political consequences of this policy intertwine. It empowers individuals, strengthens cultural ties, boosts the economy, and elevates the political stature of Ibrahim Traoré. But above all, it plants a seed of imagination. If one small nation can lead the way, what could happen if the entire continent followed? When news broke that Burkina Faso had abolished all visa fees for African citizens, international observers were left stunned. In Washington, Brussels, and Paris, policymakers, accustomed to African nations waiting for external approval, suddenly faced a different reality: a small, landlocked country asserting itself as a continental pioneer. From the perspective of the United States, the development is both intriguing and unsettling. On one hand, USD policymakers often speak about the importance of African integration, investment, and regional security. In theory, the move by Burkina Faso aligns with Washington's stated goal of a more open and interconnected Africa. But beneath the rhetoric lies unease. A borderless Africa led by leaders like Ibrahim Traoré represents something the U.S. cannot easily influence. It means Africans choosing to move trade and invest with each other rather than through systems shaped by American or European interests. For an older American audience, this recalls the tension of the Cold War, when nations once thought to be on the periphery suddenly redrew the lines of power. Europe, especially the European Union, reacts with a mixture of recognition and caution. EU citizens enjoy the benefits of the Schengen zone, where free movement is taken for granted. Yet, when Africans attempt to replicate that model, European media often warns of security risks or regional instability. The irony is not lost on Africans. Why should Europe celebrate its own openness while doubting Africa's Burkina Faso's move exposes this double standard with surgical precision? France, in particular, faces humiliation. For decades, it controlled visa processing for its former colonies, profiting not only financially but also politically from the bottleneck. By removing fees and streamlining the process, Burkina Faso has stripped Paris of yet another lever of influence. For a nation still reeling from the loss of military bases in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso itself, this visa policy feels like yet another nail in the coffin of French dominance in West Africa. Meanwhile, global institutions like the African Development Bank and the United Nations see the decision as a potential breakthrough. Studies from the bank have long argued that visa restrictions cost Africa billions in lost trade and investment every year. Easier mobility means faster business deals, more tourism, and stronger cultural exchange. For once, a government acted faster than the conferences and reports. In the broader world, comparisons are already being drawn. Commentators in Asia note how regional groupings like ASEAN allow freer travel within Southeast Asia, fueling growth. African diaspora communities in the Americas see Burkina Faso's policy as an invitation, perhaps even a step toward reconnecting with their ancestral homelands. For many Black Americans watching this news, it resonates deeply: a young African leader daring to dismantle barriers that once divided families and generations. Still, skepticism lingers in Western think tanks. Some argue that Burkina Faso lacks the infrastructure to handle large inflows of travelers. Others warn that terrorist networks could exploit weaker visa rules. But these criticisms often mask a deeper fear that Africa may succeed in building systems independent of Western control. A functioning, borderless Africa would undermine decades of dependency frameworks carefully maintained by foreign powers. At the end of the day, the global perspective reveals both admiration and anxiety. Burkina Faso's decision is being hailed as visionary across Africa, yet watched warily in Western capitals. And perhaps that is precisely the point. Ibrahim Traoré has positioned his nation as a symbol of defiance, an example that even small countries can shift the geopolitical conversation. The world is now asking, is this the beginning of Africa's own Schengen moment? If so, the US, Europe, and Asia will have to reckon with a continent no longer content to play by foreign rules, but determined to write its own. Burkina Faso's decision to remove all visa fees for Africans is more than a bureaucratic adjustment. It is a declaration that Africans deserve the same freedom of movement enjoyed in other regions of the world. A declaration that unity is not a slogan, but a policy. And a declaration that one small nation can stand tall and show the rest of the continent what courage looks like. But we must be sober. Change of this magnitude does not come without challenges. Security systems will be tested. Infrastructure will strain under new flows of travelers, and the eyes of powerful nations will fix on Burkina Faso, watching for any weakness to exploit. History teaches us that every step toward independence in Africa is met with resistance from outside and sometimes even from within. Yet here lies the power of the moment. By making this move, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has forced a question not only upon Africa, but upon the world. If Burkina Faso can do this, why not others? Why should Africans remain trapped by borders drawn in European boardrooms over a century ago? Why not build a continent where movement, trade, and opportunity flow as freely as the rivers of the Sahel? So I ask you, do you think that President Ibrahim Traoré's national reform strategies are truly effective? Yet, would you personally consider visiting Burkina Faso now that the doors are open? Please share if you feel you are one of the first to know about and support President Ibrahim Traoré. And don't forget to subscribe if you believe that the truth is more important than the headlines. Together, let's keep shining light on the stories that are reshaping Africa and the world.